And then you can kind of play around with doing, different things and currencies and dates and that sort of thing. So this is what's on GitHub. And then this is obviously one of my test projects. So it's pretty easy. If you want to add a language, all you have to do is check off the language that you want to add, and then it will go through, and whatever content you have in your system, it will generate the machine translations automatically and submit it to professionals if you have that set up. Some of the things that I have coming are I've gotten a lot of requests for being able to bypass the CMS part of this. I don't want people to miss out on the benefit of being able to automatically submit to translators and coordinate the translation part of that. So I'm building another rake task and process that will allow you to use your default locale file as your primary content repository, and then push that basically into the CMS so that it will do all of your submitting for the translations, and then pull it back that way. So you don't actually have to deal with adding content and maintaining it in here. But you can still log in and check on things and tweak if you need to.
Do translators log in the wordchuck then, or they get like an
interface? Yeah, so your translator, so I'm set up as a translator too, so I don't know if I actually have any. Yeah, so I don't have any, but if you're a translator, you log in and you just see what new content you have, and you can just really quickly go through.
How do you handle changes if the content in my primary locale changes and it needs to change in all the other locales?
So this is the part that I haven't launched that part yet, but I'm going to at the end of the week, and basically it just goes through and reads all of your content keys and your structure, and if it's updated, it will update and then resubmit the content for translation, and then if it's new, it will just add it and submit it for the first time.
How do you deal with things that are one sentence, one piece of text in English, but in other languages maybe 2 or 3 things depending on the gender of the person they're being spoken to, or position, relative position of the person being addressed, or stuff like that?
Do you have an example?
For example, in Spanish and French, I think there's different verb forms for different genders. And then, so in English, we just have one, essentially.
Yeah, right.
Pronouns and stuff like that. How do you deal with that?
Right. That's a good question. And I haven't actually looked into that too much, but I will. Because that's a good question.
Usually the way to address that is you have to look at large enough fragments. You can't do fragmentary translation. You have to, translations always have to be done in the context of the whole.
What if it's different depending on a user set?
That's right, yeah. You basically have to treat that as 2 separate locales. I guess how I would approach it would be 2 separate locales, and then have to save a gender modifier and say, we're going to localize it. If you're trying to personalize content for somebody, maybe you do, like Arabic is a good example where gender does change the verb form.
Right.
And maybe it's, I don't know what the 2-letter code for Arabic is, but people are whatever, underscore female or male or.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Do people load their locales up dynamically, and that CMS, you're using a CMS, so I'm wondering, is it possible that you would provide an API at some point and they wouldn't have to run a rake task and reload the locale, that we could cache the responses however we do on our end and not actually have to restart the app or whatnot?
Yeah, so there are different backends. They're called for i18n. So you can I've been talking about the simple backend, which basically, when you initialize your app, loads into the memory store from the locale files. But I do have an API. I just haven't published it yet. And so this is one of the other things I'm working on, is pulling from the API API backend to populate the memory store, and then using like there's a missing translation exception that you can catch, and
So
you
there'll
can use
be a
that.
wordchuck backend then.
There will be. There are also you can do your own database backend. There are a bunch of backends that you can use, and they're all on the Edge guide. You can see kind of an overview of the different options. And also, if you look at the i18n library, you'll get a really good idea of what some of the options are.
How do you like to handle stuff in your tests? Because sometimes I feel like I want to use the T helper to actually grab the localized text out of the localization files and use that for comparisons in my tests. And other times I want to hardwire a constant, but there's a lot of area that's gray. And
Yeah.
do you have an opinion on which way it's good to go if you don't have a strong opinion?
Well, you can explicitly declare the locale if you wanted to test like different locales and what they return. You could try that. And then I guess it's just a matter of preference as far as what you're trying to test and what you're hoping to establish.
So if the developer is the person who's making all the changes, I think that putting string constants in your test isn't really a bad thing to do most of the time. But you're talking about having the editorial process do that, and it's not just all the translations that would get changed. It's also the English text or the primary languages.
Right.
So that stuff might change, and then your tests.
Yeah.
How dependent are they on that?
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
One thing I thought about that when done using the test locale, I mean, you could even say successful string, unsuccessful string.
Oh yeah, that's
kind of abstracting the actual content.
Treat the text as data and not value instead of actually using the backend.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are the kind of issues as a developer that bite me more than trying to figure out the gender and the form and all that. It's just how am I going to deal with all this in all my tests? And I haven't ever done anything like Cucumber testing for an internationalized app, and what do I have to do to run through the UI in several different locales to make sure, or is there some set of acceptance tests that people generally write for a localization to make sure that everything is populated correctly and you're not missing anything?
Right. It's definitely, there's not an easy answer for that, but there, and it's, to be honest, not something I know that it's a sacrilege, but I'm not like a huge test-focused developer, so I haven't done a lot of really intense testing with the localization to that extent.
I had a client who had the internationalized app, and he had to make a rate test on do that. So the English was the primary language, and then the other translation files were generated from English with placeholders for ones that were empty in that language. So that translated to
Yeah, I've done similar to that. It's not too hard.
Yeah, looking for missing keys is the big thing.
A couple people have asked about, and you mentioned that translations depend heavily on context. So a word like next might need a translation, but it might be different translations in different scenarios.
Yeah.
That's capitalized.
Does wordchuck provide any of that context, or if not, do you have recommendations for how to get that information to your translation?
Right. So this is definitely an issue that comes up a lot. One of the ways that I am hoping to at least help is to send a link that shows kind of a preview of what the page looks like in the default the locale you're translating from, and to at least give them an idea of what the page looks like. But you're still, to some extent, going to be dependent on each translator's kind of interpretation and ability to aggregate and derive the